Hey guys, welcome back to the Keystone Biology Finish Line. If you don't remember that, that's the green book that no one likes. All right, yeah, that's what we're doing again today. We are going to be talking about evidence of evolution, just like the last notes. Except before we get into that, I want to talk about a little refresher, remind you, evolution, natural selection, all that good stuff. All right, so what is evolution? Easy, change over time. All right, that's what their dictionary tells us. More specifically for biology, though, it is the change in genetics of a population. All right? Say it again, the change in the genetics of a population, meaning one animal will never evolve. If one animal changes, that's not evolution, that's metamorphosis. All right? That's like caterpillar becoming a butterfly or something. No, evolution is when the genes, the alleles, remember that from previous chapter, alleles, the entire group's alleles change. Right? How likely you are to come across certain alleles changes. Maybe a certain gene only shows up 50% of the time in the population, now showing up 75% of the time. That's a change in the population. Let me show you what I mean here. Right? You're seeing that there are animals dying in this picture. There's reproduction happening. Not one animal is changing, they are just giving birth, and the traits for certain genes, or the genes for a small beak, have disappeared. The ones with the big beak are increasing across the population. Now we have more animals with a certain beak. Now, what caused that to happen is a different thing we talk about called natural selection. Natural selection is if your trait is not good, you die. If your trait is better, you will survive and pass on your genes. Natural selection and evolution are not the same thing. Natural selection causes evolution to happen. So again, natural selection, go in the past, we had animals of various beak sizes, but the ones with the smaller beak could not get to the food. The ones with the bigger beak could. So the ones with the small beak died. The ones with the big beak reproduced. So now we had more big beak than little beak. That was natural selection, choosing this guy to die and this guy to survive and reproduce. Natural selection caused evolution. We now have more of this gene than this gene. And then, of course, just like always, your siblings are never going to look the same. So the ones with even slightly bigger beaks are going to be better and steal all the food. So these guys are going to starve and die. And this guy's going to reproduce. And then we got even bigger beaks in the population. So this guy dying and this guy surviving is natural selection. And the genes changing across the population is evolution. How do we know that's actually happening? Well, we've witnessed it. We've actually caused it to happen. But let's go into the book and talk about evidence of it happening in the past. All right, so you should be seeing a page of the green book that says evidence for evolution. Right? If you don't want to read along with me and you're sick of my voice, I'm also posting the pages. You can go ahead and read it by yourself. But I will read this out loud for us. Throughout Earth's history, species have become extinct, new species have arisen, and populations have been shaped by natural selection. These processes result in enormous diversity of organisms that exist today. What is the evidence that these organisms are related by descent from a common ancestor? Well, let's look. But before we get into that, side note over here, we should always look at these side notes. It says evolution is also called descent with modification because it states that a species descended from an older species but were modified, changed in the process, just like the birds on the whiteboard I just showed you. They're all descending from each other but gradually changing. Both Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace proposed the idea of common descent at the same time. We know Charles Darwin because he got the information out there slightly faster. Alfred Russel Wallace also did that information too. So he's just as important. It is important to remember that individuals do not evolve. I'll say that again, guys. Individuals do not evolve. I need to put like the clap emoji in for this one. Individuals do not evolve. Only populations evolve. Right? The entire group, again, just like the board over here. I'm screen sharing. You can't see my board anymore. But just like that board I showed you, Certain animals died, certain animals lived, but they did not change. The population changed through reproduction. All right, so let's go into the reading. Evolutionary relationships. The theory of evolution states that every species on Earth today descended from a species that existed previously. Therefore, any two species are related due to the fact that they share a common ancestor species. Some species, such as tigers and lions, share a relatively recent common ancestor. Others, such as tigers and butterflies, last shared a common ancestor early in the history of animal life. That means lions and tigers are closely related. Their shared ancestor, they both came from the same species not too long ago. Where tigers and butterflies, theoretically, came from a shared species. They came from the same species of animal a very long time ago. The longer ago is, the more time there is for change. That's why they're very different. Evolution, going back to reading here, evolution does not lead to a steady replacement of older species with newer species, as depicted in the upper image below. This image we're talking about. All right, or that I don't have it available for you to look at right now, but that I'm trying to find it for you. Just edit all this out. All right. So just like in this picture, it looks like one species is gradually becoming another species and the old species is disappearing, replaced by the new species. That is not the case. All right. One of the many reasons why I told you this picture is wrong. That's not how it works. Right? No. Instead, starting right over here, guys. Instead, it results in a tree of life in which speciation events produce new branches. Right? It's not one branch of gradual change, it's a bunch of different branches. I'll come back and describe this in a little bit. Over time, new traits evolve in certain species. For example, hair first evolved in ancient mammal-like species. This trait has been inherited by descendant species. All mammal species alive today have hair, yet even dolphins, guys. Patterns of similarities and differences among species are evidence of evolution. Scientists use different types of evidence to determine evolutionary relationships, including fossils, anatomy, and DNA. So today we're only going to get as far as fossils, and then we'll come back and do anatomy and DNA. Right. So let's take a look at these pictures. This is the incorrect one, where it looks like on this branch, fish develop limbs and become amphibians like frogs, which means fish outright disappear. We know that's wrong. We see fish today. Fish still exist. And then this says amphibians develop hair, have live births, and become mammals. That also shows amphibians disappeared. We know that's wrong because frogs still exist. So we do this, the evolutionary tree, that you already did homework on something like this, where there was an ancient fish species and then a new trait developed in some of them, not all of them, right? So there's a shared ancestor right here between fish that stayed in the water and the fish that managed to get up on land. Now they started developing limbs and became amphibians. And then shared ancestor between amphibians and mammals, some of them started through natural selection, started developing better limbs for more walking, less swimming, started developing hair, giving live birth. So that group became mammals, and the group that stayed the way they were, or at least mostly the way they were, stayed amphibians. So now we have fish, amphibians, and mammals all branching out. And then, of course, these all branch into different amphibians, these all branch into different fish, these branch into different mammals, so on and so forth. The branching keeps happening constantly. So based on the diagram on page 196, so the one we're just looking at, what can be concluded about the last common ancestor of amphibians and mammals? So the thing that amphibians and mammals had in common. This guy right here. It had hair. Well, no, because hair developed afterwards. It laid eggs. Well, live birth showed up afterwards, so back here would be eggs. That looks right. Did not have gills. I don't know if it's amphibious. It probably doesn't have gills. And did not have limbs. No, it had limbs. So let's see what the book says. I am going with it laid eggs. Because hair evolved after the mammal amphibian lineage had diverged, separated, the last common ancestor did not have hair. So not A. Because gills are present in fish and amphibians, they were likely present. Okay, so I'm not an amphibian expert. I got that one wrong. The amphibians I know of absorb air through their skin. Frogs can do that, by the way. So choice C is incorrect. Because limbs had evolved in the line leading to the last common ancestor of mammals and amphibians, it must have had limbs. So choice D is incorrect. The ancestor must have laid eggs, since live birth evolved after the lineage diverged. Choice B is correct. So I was correct. Yay. All right. So going into evidence, now that we got the whole evolution happening thing and trees, let's look at the evidence. Again, let's look at the side here. Some things to be aware of. Fossils are remains or traces of organisms that once lived and have been preserved. Tracks, bones, eggshells, and even entire organisms can become fossilized. Because important note here, people think fossils are just bones. No, they are some kind of evidence preserved. Bones are an option, and most of the time they're not even bone anymore, right? The bone has been replaced by mineral. So, but they're in the shape of the bones, so they are evidence. The name Archaeopteryx, oh, we're going to talk about that guy, excellent, means ancient wing. Although it was first classified as a bird, it is now considered a dinosaur. Modern scientists use evolutionary relationships to determine classification because birds descended from dinosaurs. They are classified as dinosaurs. Cool. All right, so let's talk about this fossil evidence. In some cases, while organisms die, they leave behind evidence of their existence in the form of fossils. Perhaps the most well-known example of fossils are dinosaur bones. But a fossil can be any evidence that an organism once existed, such as footprints preserved in the mud or a chunk of petrified wood. By arranging fossils chronologically through a variety of dating techniques and by comparing fossils to living organisms, scientists can infer how life on Earth has changed over hundreds of millions of years. Just like in the notes I showed you before, guys, you can actually line up fossils by age. Put the older ones first and the newer ones last, and it looks kind of like a flip book. You can actually see them changing over time. Fossil evidence tells us that fishes exist before four-limbed vertebrates and that dinosaurs existed before the first birds. Fossil evidence supports the idea that life on Earth has changed over time and that new species arise from pre-existing species. And this is a picture of the Archaeopteryx fossil, famous one, be found in museums. See if I can find you a color version of that. So this is the Archaeopteryx fossil. You can see the bone shapes on the imprint. You can see the head tilting back just like the raptor fossil in Jurassic Park. That's actually a cool thing that happens because of the sun beating down. The tendons on the back of the neck shorten as they heat up, and it pulls the head back. So it didn't like die with its head back there. That happened after death. And the cool thing is you can see a wing pattern in the mud. It's very difficult to find feathers fossilized, but if you're lucky, you can find the imprint that the feathers left in the dirt fossilized. And so this is a dinosaur that had wings, that had feathers. And this is some artist renditions of what it might have looked like when it was alive. All right, reading again. Paleontologists have identified transitional fossils or intermediate forms between older species and their more modern descendants. For example, an example of a transitional fossil is that of the Archaeopteryx, considered to be an intermediate form between dinosaurs and birds. Guys, if you don't know what that word intermediate means, it means in between, right? Somewhere in between old and new. So Archaeopteryx is supposedly an animal that's somewhere in between dinosaur and birds. The first Archaeopteryx fossil was discovered in 1861, revealing a creature that shared many features with those of small bipedal dinosaurs, including a bony tail, well-developed teeth, and 3 grasping claws on each wing. The fossil also included bird-like characteristics such as hollow bones, uh, furcula, which I'm not sure I've said that right, but that's the wishbone, and impressions of feathers. Scientists first thought Archaeopteryx to be an ancestral bird, but later fossil finds suggested it's one of the several bird-like dinosaurs. Most paleontologists today think Archaeopteryx is not a direct ancestor of modern birds, but a relative of this avian ancestor. Still, the fossil evidence is clear. Modern birds evolved from a dinosaur ancestor. Right? That is what the evidence is telling us. Which statement best describes the significance of the Archaeopteryx fossil? They revealed the direct ancestor of birds. B, they proved that dinosaurs were feathered. C, they provided the first evidence for evolution. Or D, they showed that birds and dinosaurs have a common ancestor. Let's see what they say here. Most scientists think Archaeopteryx was an evolutionary dead end, not a direct ancestor of birds, so choice A is incorrect. Right? But there's no actual evidence saying that the Archaeopteryx became birds. Right? Scientists have only recently begun to understand the details of how evolution occurs, but many scientists have noted evidence for change over time. Archaeopteryx fossils are evidence for bird evolution, but are not the first evidence for evolution, so B is incorrect. The fossils show that Archaeopteryx was feathered, but one cannot conclude from the fossils of a single species that all dinosaurs were feathered, so C is incorrect. Right. We only can prove certain species had feathers. Fossils show that Archaeopteryx had characteristics of both dinosaurs and modern birds, which suggests a close evolutionary relationship between the two groups. The correct answer is D. All right. And that is where we are going to call it quits today with reading. All right. We will come back on Wednesday and read up on other evidence. For now, please try to go back to Google Classroom and find the assignment that is waiting for you.